explain to me if you've heard that notion and whether or not you understand why that might be so.
I totally agree with you, Carrie. What I've witnessed, observed, and researched was that if a person is channeling and they are in their ego, it can be detrimental because their ego will kind of step in and say things that's not of 100% spirit per se. So the work that we did, like I said from the very beginning, when you're in these lower, and the way I'm going to say it is these lower levels, it doesn't mean that they're any less of a spirit. It's just the energy levels and how we have to communicate as human beings here, like higher, lower, just so there's a difference. But anyway, as you're going up, the higher you ascend within these particular energies, and what I believe is everything around us is energy. I mean, everything. And when you tap into energy, if you can let your ego blend with your spirit, you're a more well-rounded channel, and you're less detrimental, if you will. And however, some of the people that are out there, they haven't taken care of karma and some of the other things that, and mostly I would say karma.
Issues.
Yeah, karma issues and the cellular memories they brought, not just with this lifetime, but other lifetimes. And therefore, they're not a clear channel, is the best way I can put it.
Okay, so I hear that. What about you, Terry? Are you aware of that concept? And also, are you aware of the notion of allowing another, entity to sort of take you over? That in itself is considered to be possibly detrimental to an emerging spirit.
Yes, I am aware of it because I am what they consider an empath, and I'll feel you before I see anything. And so what happens is that in the beginning, when Joe and I were doing the exploration, I was starting out, first of all, just getting acquainted with my higher mind and out of body experiences and things like that. And what would happen was, because we didn't really know what we were doing, what happened was I had a couple of negative experiences. And in the beginning, there was, I felt like somebody was tugging on my heart at one time, and so tight that it like jarred me out of the situation. And of course, I always look at everything in light. I don't know why I do, but now I see things more. Ever since I got into the extraterrestrial realm, I see more things in the Christ consciousness type thing without religion. And so that kind of protects me. I see that as my protection, but at the same time, back in the early times when we were just exploring, Joe and I went to Gettysburg. Are you familiar with Gettysburg?
Well, I haven't been there, but of course I've heard of it.
Well, there's a lot of energy in Gettysburg. That's where the Civil War reenactments and things like that go on there.
Yeah.
And so I was in a hotel room with Joe, and Joe fell asleep. And what happened was I had a really bad toothache all of a sudden, just came out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden I felt that pressure, like the pressure that an entity was coming through. And this was probably the first time that I said, okay, we got to look at this differently. And what happened was I had no control of myself at that time, and I had to wake Joe up. Even though I was still channeling this entity.
Verbally.
Yeah, verbally. What happened was it was a guy named Peter who was a soldier, and I could actually feel the smoke in his lungs from the gun fire. And then what happened was I could see him charging. So all of my senses were alive. And so what happened was I was realizing that Peter was scared, and he was at the same time that he was charging, and I could not communicate with him. So somehow I got Joe awake, and I said, Joe, I need help. And so Joe was talking to Peter, and what happened was Peter thought he was still fighting the war, obviously, and what happened was he got shot in the face, and that's where my toothache came in. And so he got shot in the face where my tooth was hurting, and then even 3 months, it took me 3 months to get to a dentist afterwards. This was actually in October, November, December. Yeah, in December I was able to get to a dentist. And the dentist turned around and said to me, he goes, Terry, what did you do to your tooth? Because I told him that's what I went in there for, because my tooth was still hurting. And he goes, you cracked your whole tooth vertically. And he goes, this was one of your better teeth. And when he took the tooth out, because there was no way of saving it, you could see how that whole tooth was cracked or was broken. And so that was the impact from getting shot in the face, or experiencing Peter's trauma. And that's when I had to look at things differently and had to go within and ask for some type of a higher protection, and started getting more involved in the angelic world. I kind of moved out of that and got involved into the angelic world. I went through stages, believe it or not. And so I went from this astral stage into the angelic stage. And then once I got into the angelic stage, I didn't have too much of this ghostly stuff going on. I still see orbs, and I still see energy moving around, and I still understand what they are, but I don't invite them anymore, is what happened. So I think you have to be responsible if you're going to do this work, is how I look at it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's good to hear that you have, you have some basis for what you're doing, and you understand, the dangers there, because, I think the dangers are very real. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that are, whether they like it or not, inviting various entities in. Sometimes the entities are, not, they're coming uninvited, or at least on a conscious level.
Right. And like that. Choose to stay away from them.
Right. Well, not everyone has, they may be able to channel, but they won't have the ability to withstand the power or the energy of the entity.
Right. And
spiritually, their growth is just not at that level.
Right. And that's one of the blessings of meeting Joe, because, like Joe said, everything. Pardon me?
I'm sorry. Can you elaborate on that? Why is that? How did Joe have something to do with that?
Well, I always ask for all the right people to be brought into my life to help me, to transform, or I've always been someone that would say to the universe. Now, I have no religious background. I just have an understanding that I know there's more out there than just me and things like that. So, I always ask for that next person to come into my life to help me to evolve. Because ever since I went through another title, Kundalini experience, I realized that I was on a journey. And so I always ask for people to come into my life. Just like when I go out to Arizona, I know that I'm being driven out there. So I'm going to ask for all the right people to come into my life to show me my next step into this journey. And this is where I came in, and I was marketing myself as a smoking cessation counselor and a hypnotist. And Joe just happened to be there and overheard hypnotherapist. And the next thing I know, after his hours, when he was done, he said, come on back after I get done working. We sat for like 5 hours, I think, just talking and talking and talking and talking. That synchronicity, that feeling of knowing each other type thing. And,
so at a certain level, it also sounds as though Joe is something of a protective spirit around you.
Oh, absolutely. I went through a lot of human emotions in this last year and a half with Joe, as well as spiritual exploration with him. You know, it's kind of like in the beginning, I didn't really know why